contests are great when experienced once, but sometimes you've got to do it again. Avery Entertainment presents the return of the You Name It Tour. Pastor Shirley Caesar headlines this dynamic encore. Saturday, November 12th at the Sumter County Civic Center. Also featuring the Canton Spirituals.
We didn't have much.
Those Mississippi boys are coming.
But the Lord been good to me.
Doc McKenzie and the Highlights.
I wanna live so God can use me anywhere.
The Gospel Legends. Roy and the Revelation. The return of the You Name It Tour. Saturday, November 12th at the Sumter County Civic Center. Doors open at 2. Program begins 3:45. Platinum, VIP, and advanced tickets available. Get them at Eventbrite. Imports Limited in Sumter. Al's Musica and Undisputed Barbershop. For info, call.
That, but just the fact that he took out time to interview with me on tonight means so much to me, and I know it means as much to you as well. We want to say good evening to everybody. We thank you for joining us on Loretta Coleman Live on tonight. All of you, we usually allow you to make comments. As always, we want to give our interviewer the amount of time that he needs. We have a lot of questions for him. If you have questions, you can send them as well. Now, without further ado, we're going to bring to you, I tell you, the Honorable Congressman James E. Clyburn. He is the Majority Whip in Washington, D.C., and if I'm not mistaken, the third highest person in Congress. Am I right, Congressman Clyburn?
That is correct. Thank you very much for having me.
Well, we are honored to have you on here tonight, and we're going to try to get right to it. We want to say welcome. And again, we thank you so very much for just giving us the opportunity on tonight to interview you. For those of you who don't know him, you should know him because he's all over the news. He has done great things, not only for the state of South Carolina, but all over the world. And I want, when you get off Facebook tonight, I want you to put his name in Google, and you're going to see all the wonderful things that he has done. Don't believe anybody when they say he hasn't done anything, because the proof is in the pudding. And you can put his name in there. And while I was studying, I did not realize that he had done some of the things he has done. And I just want to say thank you. But Congressman Clyburn, we want to start off again by welcoming you. What we want you to talk about and help young people, middle-aged people, older people realize the importance of voting.
Well, thank you very much for having me. I guess the best way I can drive home the point on voting is this. You may recall after the last election, there were significant attempts to throw the election into the House of Representatives. That's what this whole thing was about, trying to get the vice president not to certify certain states so as not to have a majority of these so-called electoral college. Well, the last time an election was thrown into the House of Representatives was in 1876, when Rutherford B. Hayes became president. Rutherford B. Hayes became president by cutting a deal with southern states in order to bring it in to Reconstruction. He promised him, if you give me your votes and make me president, then I will take all the troops out of the South, the troops that were enforcing the whole Emancipation Proclamation, which had been signed, and we were into Reconstruction. So they gave him the votes. He took the troops out and ushered in what we now call Jim Crow. He won by one vote.
Wow.
Rutherford B. Hayes became president of the United States by one vote, and that one vote brought an end to Reconstruction, kicked in Jim Crow laws. That's the most, I can't think of anything better to describe how important one vote is. That one vote made the difference in whether or not Black folks who had just come out of slavery, who were coming into full-fledged citizenship, but got short-circuited by one vote.
Wow. So when they say that their vote does not matter,
it just doesn't happen in presidential stuff. I ran into a young man the other day who told me he had just gotten elected mayor of his town, and he won by one vote. And he said to me, he says, when the votes were counted that evening, I was down by 2. I was losing by 2. But when they opened up the absentee votes, I had 3 absentee votes and ended up winning by 1. And that's a town right there in Lexington County, South Carolina. So one vote made him mayor of his town. He happens to be African American and the first African American mayor of that little town there in Lexington County. So I want to say to everybody, it is possible for me in this election to win by one vote. It is also possible that I could lose by one vote. Mm-hmm. So one vote always matters. I mean, people say it doesn't matter. They're going to do what they want to do. That's just not true. And I will get, as we interview, I'll tell you, if you can't see a difference between Joe Biden as president and what we had with 45, then there's something wrong with your sight.
Mm-hmm. It's indeed wrong, because that was something that I never thought I would ever experience at 61 years old. I've never saw anything like that before in my life. Nobody could tell him anything.
No. He had all the answers, and this, I want to emphasize this. You know, all of us have studied about Adolf Hitler and what happened in Germany. People have to remember that what was taking place here in 2020 was a microcosm of what took place in Germany after Adolf Hitler got elected chancellor. Adolf Hitler was elected chancellor. He wasn't, and he set out to discredit the news media. He co-opted the churches, had swastikas hanging in the churches all over Germany, just as you saw 45. Discredit, calling the press the enemy of the people, discrediting the press. And then the next thing he knew, he was co-opting evangelicals. They all laying hands on him in their churches And it was the same thing that happened in Germany. And I've been trying to warn people about this. You know, I've studied this all of my life. I started studying history when I was an 8-year-old kid. When my daddy would make me read the newspapers every day and report to him every night on some current event. So I grew up in this, and I've been studying this all of my life. And when I said back in 2018 that Donald Trump was not planning to give up the presidency, I caught a lot of flack from a lot of people when I said that. In fact, I went on CNN television, and the reporter asked me, Don Lemon asked me, are you calling Putin, calling Trump Hitler? I said, no. Putin is Hitler. Trump is Mussolini. Because Mussolini was over there in Italy, mimicking everything Hitler was doing in Germany. And you've got this guy here in the United States of America as president following Putin. So to me, Putin was Hitler and he was Mussolini. Now, a lot of people give me a hard time about that, but it's kind of interesting. I'm sitting down watching my TV, and here is 45 coming out of the hospital. He was up there at Walter Reed Hospital getting over COVID. And when he came back to the White House that night, he went up the steps of the Truman balcony, looked out over the back of the White House, and when he stood there, Joe Scarborough on Morning Joe the next morning said he assumed a Mussolini stance. That's what Scarborough said. So I think people started listening to me after they got it in black and white.
Congressman Clyburn, you've been up there how many years?
29 years.
29 years, and you've seen it all. Is this one of the worst things you've seen?
Did I experience? Yes. Did I have studied? No. I compare what's going on today to what happened as we were ushering in the Jim Crow laws, which I think is much worse than what's going on now, because folks really, kind of rebelled. They didn't allow one person to just misrepresent everything, though they ushered in these Jim Crow laws. We had some pretty tough things that took place back in the 1930s, but never you had the acrimony that you have now. And I think there's a reason for that. And it's called social media. We didn't have the internet back then.
Right.
And when people could say things and hide, put up these false personalities, say whatever they want to say about people and not have to say it in person. So these kinds of things have led to us having a very bad situation taking place in this country. But let me say this for the benefit of the listeners. I said I study history a lot. There was a guy that came to this country way back in the 1830s to study our penal system, a guy named Alexis de Tocqueville. He came to this country from France to study our penal system. And while here, de Tocqueville says he saw something magical about the United States, and he wanted to find out what that magic was. And it said that de Tocqueville went all over the country trying to find out what was so magical about this country. He went into our legislative halls, city councils and county commissioners, the halls of Congress, looking for the magic. He said he couldn't find it. He then went out to our universities, our colleges and universities, trying to find the magic. And he said he couldn't find it. And then it is said that de Tocqueville said that it was not until he went into our places of worship that he found out what was so magical about this country. Went into our churches, our synagogues, our mosques, and our temples. And he says he came to the conclusion that America was great because its people were good. Mm-hmm. And if the people of America ever cease to be good, America will cease to be great. Now, I don't know if de Tocqueville said that. Some people said he never said that. I don't know if he did or not. I wasn't back there in 1835 when he was doing all of this. But I do know this. I'm convinced that we are losing our fundamental goodness as people toward one another. The kinds of things that people are saying. A United States Senator, just day before yesterday, who coached football at Auburn University, where the vast majority of his football players were African Americans. Look what denigrating things he said about African Americans now that he's a United States Senator, representing Alabama. Look at what Trump said when he referred to an African American woman as a dog. That's what he said, looking in the television camera, about a African American woman that was working for him.
Wow.
So what fundamental goodness is the problem we've got here. And when people can hide behind the internet and say anything, I just came out of a primary. My opponent in the primary, he ended up getting 4% of the vote, but referred to me as a coon. Now, you know, what is that? You're running for the United States Congress, rather than going out telling people what you are about, you are out there insulting people. Fundamental goodness is what's at law, what we're losing today.
So what do we need to do, Congressman Clyburn?
Well, I think, you know, I really think that what we need to do as a people is, number one, recognize that every time there is an election, somebody is going to win. Now, ask yourself whether or not that person who wins the election will have your best interest at heart. And ask yourself, did you do your part in helping to determine the outcome of the election? Or whether you just sat back and let whoever wished to go vote, and you live by the results. I think that we have to participate. We got to get involved in this process. Ask questions. I don't care who it is that's running for office. Ask questions. I want people to ask me questions. I want to tell people who and what I am. And I think you should ask that of every candidate. Don't ever let an election come and pass you by and you have not participated. Mm-hmm. If you don't vote, you should not complain about what happens. You only have the right to complain if you vote, and if you get outvoted, then complain about the policies and double down the next time and try to get somebody who will adhere to the policies you think would be in the best interest of you, your family, and your community.
Don Farson has a question. He wants you to explain about Alabama case involving Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act and what that will mean if the Supreme Court rules in Alabama favor.
Well, I'm glad for that question. Look, we've already, remember, there are two big parts to the Voting Rights Act, Section 4 and Section 2. Section 4 was a part of the Voting Rights Act that says if you make any changes, if people decide I'm going to change the precinct or I'm going to change the voting hours, or I'm going to change the district lines. Any changes you make, you have to submit them to the Justice Department for review, and the Justice Department will determine whether or not this change will have a discriminatory impact or not. And if it does, then you can't do it. That's Section 4. The Supreme Court, in the case of in another Alabama case, 9 years ago, gutted Section 4. And it says you don't have to do that anymore. That was when states were discriminating against people. They're not discriminating anymore, so you don't have to get pre-clearance anymore. And the moment they did that is when all of these southern states started passing new laws. One of which down in Georgia says that if the state can appoint a group of people, a committee, if they don't like the outcome of the election, they can overturn the results. That's another case that's coming up to the Supreme Court again now involving North Carolina. Now the case of Section 2, that case is also coming out of Alabama. Section 2 says this: you can do anything you want to do, but in order to be found guilty of discriminating, you got to prove that the intent was to discriminate. Mm-hmm. Section 2 was put into the Voting Rights Act that says we don't care about your intent. We care about the results of your action. Under Section 2, it says if what you did results in discrimination, you cannot, that would be, you would be guilty of discriminating. Up until that point, the Supreme Court has always held that Section 2 required for you to prove that the person intended to discriminate. How do you open up somebody's head to determine what they intended to do? Mm-hmm. You can't do that. And so that's the problem. This case now, the Supreme Court is getting ready to rule on. And remember, Alabama, the federal judge in Alabama said Alabama was discriminating. They got almost 30% African Americans, 7 members of Congress. Only one is African American. It discriminates. Remember, South Carolina has 7 members of Congress, of the House of Representatives, 7 in the House. Only one is black, and we've got about 26% African American votes. So if you look at it just on percentage wise, we would have at least 2.
Wow. Explain to us what's going on. I'm gonna turn my volume down. Explain to us what's going on in Georgia.
A joke, insult. You know, I can't think of anything that's happened in recent years that I see more insulting than for 45 to go down to Texas and get a former football player and tell him to come back to your birthplace and where you played football and run for the United States Senate. Now that's his credential. He played football at Georgia, and though he had not lived in Georgia, living down in Texas, because of his name and his reputation, he says, you run, you got a good enough, your name is of such that people will vote for you. And because you're black, then black folks will not be against you. Well, let me tell you something. I don't have any business trying to pilot the next spaceship into space. I'm not qualified for that. But I'm about as qualified for that as Herschel Walker is to be a United States Senator. Now, that's the most insulting thing that I've seen yet. And when I see African Americans on my television say they don't see through this. Here's somebody going to tell me they know this guy is an embarrassment. He can't rope two sentences together. He doesn't understand, here's his explanation for climate change. China, bad air, is coming in and overtaking our good air. What kind of foolishness is that? What's going on in Georgia is just an insult.
It's an insult. And some of us are falling for it. It's like we don't do, it's like Congressman Clyburn, we don't do our homework. We go by just what we see on TV.
Well, that's true for a lot of people. And that's why I try hard to come to as many programs like this one, to talk to as many people as I possibly can. I go to as many schools as I can, and I got the same message for junior high, elementary, college, medical school, law school. I don't care where it is. I got basically the same message. And it is this: people must get engaged in the process. People must work to fulfill their dreams and their aspirations. People must not allow others to dictate what you do, when you do it, and how you do it. Be driven by your dreams and your aspirations. When I ran for Congress, I had already run for Secretary of State twice, and I'd run for the House of Representatives, and I lost 3 times. And someone asked me, what you going to do now? You just lost the 3rd time. And you know what people say? 3 strikes and you're out. I said to that person, that's a baseball rule. And nobody should live their lives by baseball rules. And so I say to young people, prepare and do your best. Don't let anybody throw cold water on your dreams. I'm doing today exactly what I dreamed about when I was a pre-teenager. I dreamed about growing up, going to school, get myself prepared. And if the opportunity presented itself, I wanted to run for Congress. I wanted to serve in the Congress. And I'm doing today exactly what I dreamed about, simply because I would not allow losing 3 times to strike me out.
Oh, that's wonderful. That's wonderful. You have Miss Scott want to know, what about California? I don't know. I don't know. Is something going on in California?
She may be talking about what happened with the city council out there. The Los Angeles City Council had a meeting. It was a year ago. This incident took place a year ago. However, someone finally leaked the tape of the incident. Now I was in Los Angeles, and in fact, I'm on my way back to Los Angeles in a couple of weeks. Karen Bass is running for the mayor of Los Angeles. And of course, she'll be the first African American woman to be mayor. I went out and spent 2 days with her. And I can tell you, there's tremendous tension in that community. Part of her whole platform has to do with the homeless. I went to the homeless community. I've never seen anything like it in my life. A lot of times we look at California and we see California, this oasis. Well, let me tell you something. I saw pugilistic poverty in Los Angeles, California, like I've never seen before. Nowhere in the state of South Carolina will you find what I saw in Los Angeles. And that's part of what she's campaigning about. So the backdrop, in fact, what this lady said, she's president of the city council. She has resigned from the position because she said, I won't say the word him, because he's with the blacks, talking about another Latina. Mm-hmm. So maybe that's what she's talking about.
Okay. What about the governor race in Atlanta?
Down in Georgia, the gubernatorial race in Georgia, the last thing I saw was a 4-point margin. I saw the tracking indicate that the incumbent Kemp is leading by 4. I have seen a poll several weeks ago that had it closer than that. I do believe it's a turnout election in Georgia for both Stacey Abrams and Warnock, who's running for re-election to the Senate. It's all about whether or not people vote. If people go out and vote, they will win. If they don't vote, they will lose. Just that simple.
Is it possible that the Democrat is going to remain in, I think it's the head of Congress?
In the majority?
Yes.
Sure, it's possible. I think the numbers right now, if the election were held today, Democrats will pick up 1 or 2 seats in the Senate and get to be a majority. Right now, people have to understand, it's 50-50. It's 50-50. That's not a majority. In the House, we are 4 votes. It takes 218 votes to carry an issue in the House. We got 222. So we lead by 4 votes. If the election were held today, I suspect the odds are we would lose the House. The election is not going to be held today. It's going to be held about 28 days from now. And the trends are moving in our direction. And so I think that a good turnout of voters, we will maintain control of the House. If people don't turn out, we'll lose. Now remember, that's happened before. In 1994, when we lost the House, it was because people did not turn out. In fact, here's a factoid that you might be interested in. Bill Clinton got elected president in 1992, which is the same year I got elected to Congress. We had a record turnout of African American voters in 1992. Bill Clinton beat an incumbent Republican, George H.W. Bush. Bill Clinton beat him in 1992 because we had such a big turnout of African American voters. Everybody says, well, now we got Bill Clinton, we won this election. In 1994, we lost 56 seats in the House of Representatives, and we lost the majority. Now, here's what's interesting about that. If you go back and look at the votes in 1994, what you will find is that the Democratic vote in 1994, well, let me put it, it's best to put it this way. The Republican vote in 1994 was the same as their vote in 1992. They lost by a landslide in 92, but they kept the same vote in 94 and beat us, shellacking. And it's because the Democrat vote from 1992 dropped so far down in 1994, the Republicans with the same vote won a landslide.
So do you think we got comfortable or we just didn't go out and vote?
I think we got both. They got comfortable and didn't go out to vote. We did the same thing with Barack Obama. Barack Obama got elected in 2000 and 8. In 2008 he got elected, and in 2010 we lost 60-something seats, and we lost 1,000 legislative seats as a result of Obama. So because people, we don't elect them now, we got comfortable, and so we'll wait and see what they do. Well, you got to have a supporting cast.
Yes.
The president ain't got no vote in Congress. The president can propose all he wants, but if he doesn't have the votes in the Congress, he cannot get anything passed. No matter what you may want, you got to have a Congress to deliver. Like we got the votes in the House, we passed every bill that everybody ever said they wanted. But because it's 50-50 in the Senate, and they got the filibuster rules, things we sent over there, still sitting there. With some exceptions. We passed the Rescue Act, and that had a big impact. We passed the infrastructure bill, a big impact. We passed the Chips and Science Act, a bigger impact. We passed the Inflation Reduction Act, even a bigger impact. And we passed the PAC Act for our veterans. All the experts are now saying that what we did in the last 12 months in the United States Congress is the biggest thing that's happened. I should go back before 12, because we passed the Rescue Act in March of last year. So if you count from March of last year to now, you're going to come up with about 18 months. So in 18 months, we've passed more progressive legislation than has been done since 1965, when Lyndon Johnson was president of the United States. Joe Biden, we delivered him here in South Carolina when everybody thought he was a goner. He had finished fourth in Iowa, finished fifth in New Hampshire, a distant second in Nevada, and everybody said his candidacy was over. Well, South Carolina says it ain't over till it's over. And we went to the polls in February of 2021, February of 2020, and we delivered Joe Biden a victory. He went on to win the presidency, and all the experts say he was the only Democrat that could have unseated 45.
Wow. Y'all listen, we got to get out and we got to vote. We got to get on social media. We got to text. We got to do all of this. We got to get our children. We got to get our cousins. We got to get everybody we can to get out and vote. Congressman Clyburn, do you think it's a possibility that he could win the presidency 45 if he ran again?
Oh, yeah. No question about it.
And he'll come back with revenge, right?
In fact, look, I'm telling you, this country moves, the movement in this country I want your listeners to think about this now. A lot of people think when we start talking about making progress, people think we go from point A to point B to point C, and we keep on going. Well, that's not the way it works. This country's movement has always been like a pendulum on the clock. It goes left, the pendulum goes left, tops out, and it goes back right. Tops out, goes back left. That's the way this country has always been. Just think about our history. We went from the Emancipation Proclamation in 1863 to Plessy versus Ferguson. In 1896, making separate but equal the law of the land. Then we went back with Brown v. Board of Education in 1954 saying segregation is per se unconstitutional. And the moment we stopped out there, the country started going back. The country went left and elected Barack Obama. Went right back right and elected Trump. That's the way this country has always moved. What makes the difference is the intervention of the voter. When the voter intervenes in record numbers, as we did in 2008, it makes a difference. So to all your listeners, look, this pendulum has moved back to the right, moving back to the conservative level. The only thing that's going to stop it is the intervention of the voter. That's the only thing going to stop this movement. If we do not win this election November the 8th, I think that this democracy could very well cease to exist.
We have.
Now, by the way, just Google it. You'll see there are thousands of experts who will tell you that. Mm-hmm. I think that my only claim to glory is I said it in 2018, caught a lot of flack for it, but it's a fact. People are now seeing that we are pretty close. On January 6th, 2021, that was an attempt to overturn an election.
Yes.
That was a coup. The kind of thing they do in third world countries. That's what it was. It failed, but as one of the oath keepers said today, there's going to be a next time. There will be a next time. And according to him, we won't fail the next time. Well, that all depends on what we do this year.
So, Congressman Clyburn, we have New York, California, Louisiana, Alabama, Georgia, all parts of South Carolina, North Carolina, Tennessee. Those are where I've seen that's listening tonight. We have enough people that is listening tonight to make a difference if they listen to what you are saying. And this is very critical, very critical. And we want everybody, wherever you are, share this video, share the wisdom of Congressman Clyburn. Mississippi, I forgot, Mississippi too is here tonight. We want to make sure the word gets out. And that's why I wanted you to come so you could talk to people from all over and let people know we got to get out and vote. We got to make that difference.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me. I see Mississippi is in the house. I just left. I was in Cleveland with Benny Thompson. Benny is my closest friend in the Congress, and Benny and I have been serving there together, as I said, for 29 years. But we knew each other for 20 years before. And Benny, as you know, I think they're going to have what may be their last year, and he chairs the January 6th committee. I just mentioned what happened on January 6th in 2021. Benny Thompson is chairing that committee that's getting to the bottom of that. Just think about that. Benny Thompson, Mississippi, grew up plowing cotton fields in Mississippi, is now sitting in the United States House of Representatives as chair of the committee that is getting to the bottom of what happened on January 6th. That's what happens when you vote. When you vote, that's what happens. If we lose this election, he will not be chair of that committee anymore. He will not be chair of Homeland Security anymore. I will not be the majority whip anymore. I will be a backbencher in the Congress, and all Democrats will be backbenchers if we lose this election.
Wow. We also got Detroit. We got Connecticut. I mean, it's just so many people. New York, we said New York. They're coming out here. Virginia. I mean, it's just people listen to Congressman Clyburn. Somebody said, ask him about student loans.
Well, I'm glad to talk about student loans. That's a big deal. Look, my legislation that I introduced almost 2 years ago asked for $50,000 of student loan forgiveness. Joe Biden campaigned for $10,000. He said he couldn't do 50. Now, he had his reasons for it. I understood his reasons. But he did something. Not only did he sign an executive order for $10,000, he went a step further and said, if you got a Pell Grant, you can get $20,000 of loan forgiveness. Now, I've looked at the percentage of people who owe $20,000 or less. So if you can get up to $20,000, that's going to reach over 70% of the people that got Pell Grants. Over 70%. 10,000, a lot of people, but not near 70%. But here is the other thing that Joe Biden did. Nobody is talking about it, but it's one of the biggest deals that he has done, especially when it comes to students. And that is public service loan forgiveness. Public service loan forgiveness. We passed a bill back in 2008, I believe. The first year that you benefit from that bill was 2017. Here's what the bill says. If you have student loan debt, you graduate and you go to work in a public service entity, you public school teacher, police officer, fireman, working for a 501c3, nonprofit, public service. Not if you go out and hang out a single and make your own personal business. But if you go to work in a public service and you pay on your loan for 10 years, you can then apply to have the loan forgiven. Now in 2017, now you know who was president in 2017. He got elected in 2016. He got elected in 2016. 45 got elected in 2016. The public service loan forgiveness program became effective in 2017. And when the people applied, only 1% of the people who applied got approved. And then in 2018, 45 tried to get rid of the program. We in Congress says, no, we're not going to get rid of it. We're going to work for it and we're going to make it right. And we elected Joe Biden in 2020. In 2021, Joe Biden ordered his education department to take a look at that bill, rework the law to make it effective. And guess what happened? He then says, we're going to reopen this thing for the next 12 months. Starting in October 2021, we're going to give everybody that 99% that did not get approved, reapply. And you got until October 31, 2022. That's just 3 more weeks. Reapply. Now here's what happened in the first 8 months. In the first 8 months, 175,000 people got their loans forgiven.
Wow.
To the tune of over $10 billion. I want to say that again. 175,000 people in the first 8 months. I don't know it because I have not checked the numbers, but I would bet there's over 200,000 people now that have gotten their loans forgiven. And rather than $10 billion, I would suspect it's been 13 or 14 billion. I didn't say million now. 13 or 14 billion dollars in loan forgiveness. Now I had a webinar to inform people about this about a month ago. 750 some odd people were on the webinar. Then it was so many people, we decided to have a second one. So 2 weeks later, I had a second webinar. Over 500 people participated. And the last person to speak was a young lady who said, I want everybody to know I'm a psychologist. I had over $100,000 in loans. Undergraduate, graduate school, I owed $100,000. I reapplied. And she said this, I got a letter 2 weeks ago saying all is forgiven.
Wow.
Now, I can tell you a lot of other stories like that. I just remember that one because she was on a virtual meeting like this. Look, if you have a student loan debt, if you've got a student loan debt and you have been paying on that loan for 10 years and you still got a debt, and there are a lot of people fall in this category, go online or get your child, grandchild to go online for you. You're eligible to get that loan forgiven. I didn't say reduce or modify. If you work in the public sector, you can have it forgiven.
Don Bryson wrote a book. So do you see what he wrote? Maybe you can answer that.
Yeah, can you show us tonight in the bills and majority? Well, let me go through it. When we passed the Rescue Act, according to the experts, lifted over half of the children who were living in poverty, lifted them out of poverty. Not a single Republican voted for it. Every Republican voted against it. When we passed the Inflation Reduction Act, not a single Republican voted for it. Every one of them voted against it. What did it do? It capped the cost of insulin at $35 for everybody on Medicare. It says that come 2025, unless we lose this house and we elect somebody to undo what we did, if you're on Medicare, come 2025, your maximum your cost, maximum cost, $2,000 a year.
Wow.
Now, the $35 for insulin is $35 a month. We did the studies, and we found out that you can make insulin for $10, package it, make it and package it for $10 a month. So why are they charging $800 in some instances for insulin. We capped it, and not a single Republican voted for it. Imagine that. Saying to senior citizens who need insulin, who are rationing insulin sometimes to buy groceries, and the Republicans voted against it. That, to me, is a shame. Now, here's what is also shameful. The House passed the bill, and I know so well because it was my bill.
Mm-hmm.
The House passed the bill to cap the cost of insulin at $35 a month for everybody. Everybody. Senior citizen, newborn children. We have juvenile diabetes all over the country. No matter who you are, it should be capped at $35. The Senate would not agree. They couldn't get the votes for it. So they said we'll limit it to senior citizens on Medicare. If you're on Medicare, it would be capped at $35. Well, let me say to all your listeners tonight, we re-elect this Congress. The Democrats, we are going to pass $35 for everybody. Children are being born with diabetes every day. These children, most of them, are not born into families with big health insurance policies. A lot of them are born in families on Medicaid. A lot of them are being born in families without any insurance at all. We should cap the cost of insulin at $35 for everybody. And I will say to your listeners, I don't believe there's a single person here tonight without a family member or a friend that's suffering with diabetes. Diabetes is a tough disease, and we should not be holding people hostage. So I will say tonight, re-elect the Democrats, and we are going to get that $35 for everybody, not just senior citizens.
Do you have this information on your page, on your website?
All of us, yes. This information is there. Click on the Jim Clyburn, whatever my website is.
Mm-hmm. Wow, this has been real powerful. Real
Every
powerful.
now and then my website jump up when I'm trying to type my name for something else.
Mm. Congressman, how do you feel? Oh,
someone just came in, Miss Davenport, saying how they struggle every month with her mother, how shameful it is for her to suffer like this. That is right. My late wife suffered with diabetes for 30 years. 30 years, 4 shots a day, diabetic. And her bill was over $800 a month for insulin. That should not be. That should not be.
Congressman Clyburn, you know that things are high. Food high, gas high. They're going up on rent for people who are not buying houses. People are getting evicted every day. What can be done? Is there anything that can be done? Is there any type of help?
Yes, there's a lot being done. That's one of the reasons we remember, we talking about the Inflation Reduction Act. We put this stuff about insulin and other, I just mentioned insulin. I didn't mention other stuff that we did in the Inflation Reduction Act because we said food is going up, all these things go up. We got to help people whose prices, we may not be able to do anything in here about food, but we could do something about insulin. We could do something about the cost of Medicare. Of medicine if you're on Medicare. Yes, we are doing things. The president has done significant things to drive down the cost of gasoline prices per gallon. If you remember, for the last, 8 or 9 months, it was going down every month. Putin went to the OPEC nations. He and Saudi Arabia got together last week and said that they were going to reduce by 2 million gallons a day the production of oil. Why are they doing that? So they can drive the cost up and drive Joe Biden out of power. That's what they're trying to do. They're mad because Joe Biden is helping Ukraine. They're mad because Democrats are supporting Joe Biden, and they're trying to do everything they can to embarrass Joe Biden. Putin and Saudi Arabia are conspiring to undercut us and to hurt Joe Biden.
Now,
so we all not give Putin a victory.
I tell you, this is simply amazing. And I have learned some things, and I'm personally going to go to your website and study up on some more, because you've helped me with so much tonight. And it just bothers me when I hear people say, well, what is Congressman Clyburn doing? You've done so much.
Well, you know, people, that's what I said about social media. Let me just take you through a couple of things. You know, I did say this $35 per limit instant thing. That was my bill. I didn't talk about the bipartisan infrastructure bill. When they were getting ready to put together a bipartisan infrastructure bill, I said to them, I said, because the other side said, we're going to do traditional infrastructure. See, living in the South, I know what tradition means. I said, oh no, we're going to do beyond tradition. We're going to do roads and bridges, water and sewage. We'll do the ports and the rails, but that's not all we're going to do. You remember what they call the what they call the internet when it first came out? They call it the information highway. So I said to my caucus, we're going to treat the information highway the same way we treat the interstate highway. That's what we're going to do. And we did. When that bill passed, Jim Clyburn. Now, I think you know, Loretta, that my motto in life, now I've already told my 3 daughters, I want it on my tombstone when I'm no longer on the side. I want my tombstone to read, he did his best to make this country's greatness accessible and affordable for all. You've seen that on my billboards. It's all over my district. That's still on my billboards. But here's what I want you to look at that bill, and you will see in the infrastructure bill, there's $65 billion to make accessible broadband, accessible and affordable. It is called the Accessible and Affordable Broadband for All. That's quite familiar. That's because that's my bill. Mm-hmm. $65 billion for broadband. That's my bill. For all of you listening, people say to you, what has Jim Clyburn done? Look and see who put that in there. Monday of last week, I stood with Governor McMaster.
Yes.
And Governor McMaster, looking in the cameras, said to all South Carolinians, but for Jim Clyburn, we wouldn't be standing here today. When he said we just connected 100,000 new homes to the internet, and we're going to build out 100% in the next 3 to 5 years, that's because, as he said, of the work Jim Clyburn did. I don't understand how people can live in this country, especially in this state, and said, I can't think of anything that Jim Clyburn has done. You got to be living in a hole somewhere.
Right.
And I'm just going to 10, 20, 30. There are 21 sections of the appropriations bill that says in this bill, at least 10% of all the money being appropriated here must be spent in communities where 30% or more of the population, 20% or more of the population has been stuck beneath the poverty level for the last 30 years. The Census Bureau says any county where 20% or more of the population is stuck beneath the poverty level for the last 30 years is a persistent poverty county. Jim Clyburn says that means at least 10% of all the money that we're appropriating here should be targeted to those counties. That's where the formula 10, 20, 30 came from. I put that in Reinvestment Act back in 2009. So ask anybody, how did the Connery National Monument become the Connery National Park? The Connery National Park, the Reconstruction Era National Park, the South Carolina National Heritage Corridor, the Gullah Geechee Heritage Corridor, are 4 of those tourism bills that's bringing over 700,000 visitors to South Carolina every year. All 4 of those tourism attractions got one thing in common. All 4 of them are Jim Clyburn sponsored bills. All 4 are my bills.
Wow.
In fact, most people in Washington will tell you that yours truly is one of the most productive Congress people sitting in Washington. So if anybody tells you they can't think of anything that Jim Clyburn has done, tell them maybe they can't read.
I tell them just to read. I said, apparently you don't read, because if you read, you will see everything he has done. Encourage this. Ms. Lockett said, we're stuck in Mississippi.
Well, no, you aren't. Bennett Thompson is doing a lot. He's won. He had 4 Congress people. He's outvoted 3-1. You have a problem in Mississippi with a governor. Your governor has rendered injustices to Jackson, Mississippi. He vetoed a bill that the legislature passed to provide good water to Jackson, Mississippi. The governor vetoed it. Your governor has just, not this governor, but the governor before him, coerced with Brett Favre to take the money that Bennett Thompson and I and others in Congress sent to Mississippi to be used for welfare workers. They took the money and let Brett Favre spend the money for his daughter with the volleyball court. Mm-hmm. So that's what's happening in Mississippi. You got to vote these people out of office. You got these governors. We just had, well, it was Alabama, but that's what's going on here. Yeah, you're stuck in some instances, but Bennett is doing one hell of a job. I know, because I sit with him almost every evening when we're in Washington. I said, I was in Cleveland, Ohio last weekend. Who was out there with? With Bennett Thompson, trying to help Tim Ryan get elected to the Senate, trying to help Chantel Brown get re-elected to the House. We're running all over the country trying to make sure that we maintain this majority and pick up some seats in the Senate. You're unstuck, not forever. We're working on it.
I like that. We got to go vote. That's the answer, everybody. Congressman Clyburn has poured out his heart. On tonight, he's given us information. He's given us vital information. He's told us what we need to do. Now it's going to be left up to us whether we do it or not. He can only tell us. He can't make us do it, but he can only tell us. He's given us so much. We encourage you to go to his website. I have it pinned on my page so you can read about more that he has done and some other things about him that you may not know. Congressman Clyburn is a jewel for Washington, D.C. I'm telling you. And he knows what he's talking about. So I encourage all of you that's on here. We are on 7 different platforms tonight. So whatever platform you're listening to me at, please, ma'am, please, sir, take this information that you've learned tonight. And we want you to be accountable. We want you to make your state, your city a better place. And you can't do it if you sit home and don't vote.
Well, thank you so much for having me. Loretta, I just got to say this. I'm sitting here looking at your background, the pumpkins, I don't know whether that's artwork or your front porch, whatever it is. It's very seasonal, and I'm impressed. I'm impressed.
Thank you.
And thank you so much.
Anytime you want to come on my platform, just have your staff to contact me. We want the word to be out.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me.
Is there anything else you want to say?
Well, just let me close by saying this. I talked about Alexis de Tocqueville in his having been credited with having talked about the goodness of the country. Let me tell you, there's something that I know de Tocqueville wrote because I read it. He published a 2-volume work called Democracy in America. Now, whether or not de Tocqueville made the statements about the goodness of America, I don't know. But I know this because I saw it in the book. De Tocqueville wrote this: America's greatness is not that it is more enlightened than any other nation, but rather because it has always been able to repair its faults. We had some fault lines to reveal themselves with COVID-19. We saw a fault line with our educational system. That's why I worked so hard for broadband. We saw a fault line in our healthcare delivery system. That's why we got to have telehealth and telemedicine if we're going to solve this problem. We saw some fault lines open up. Our greatness will be determined by whether or not we can repair those faults. And so when anybody say to you and talk about, say the whole issue of reparations, remember the root word is repair. That's what it is, to repair. So if we're repairing the educational system, we're repairing the health care system, we're repairing our housing system, we're repairing our energy production. That is the extent to which we are working today. You can't do it all in one fell swoop. Remember, when Congress passed the Civil Rights Act of 1964, in order to pass the bill, Lyndon Johnson took voting out of it. He took housing out of it. It only applied to the private sector. We passed it. A lot of people were upset, but we came back a year later. After the November elections, I want you to think about this. We passed what we could in 1964 with the Civil Rights Act that only applied to the private sector. After the November elections, we delivered such a resounding victory to Lyndon Johnson over Goldwater until Lyndon Johnson had the Congress to allow him to pass the Voting Rights Act of 65, the Fair Housing Law of 68. That's how we did it. We passed what we could in 1964, and then we went to the polls in record numbers in November of 64, and that's how we got the Voting Rights Act in 65 and the Fair Housing Law in 68, because we turned up to vote in record numbers. It didn't happen just dry long so, as we say in Gullah Geechee country.
Thank you so much, Congressman Clyburn. And I say again, if you want to come back and give it another push before Election Day, just have your staff to contact me.
Thank you very much. I look forward to it.
All right. Thank you so very much. Good night.
Good night.